And welcome back to the Touchline Talk Show. As I mentioned at the top of every segment, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss anything I put out every single week on YouTube. The other big news so far this week: Lionel Messi suspended 2 weeks by PSG for missing training due to a trip to fulfill his Saudi Arabia tourism promotional responsibilities. Listening to Fabrizio Romano talk about this, there are some details that are important I want to get out first. Number one, reportedly Messi rescheduled this trip twice to accommodate PSG's schedule. And Messi's side of the story is that he had gotten this figured out. He picked this time for a reason because there was supposed to be a break, and that he was on his way to Saudi Arabia by the time this training that got scheduled for Monday was added to the schedule. There was nothing, according to Messi, based on what Romano is reporting, there was nothing he could have done about this by the time that training session got added. Now, that's Messi's side. Just wanted to throw that out there, though. Because it wasn't like this was intentional from everything I have seen and what's being reported. That's important to clarify. And that doesn't mean he should get away with it. I am fine with him being suspended and PSG taking a stand and saying we can't have our players missing training for what is essentially, brand enhancement and commercial obligations. What cannot happen, though, is that Messi is somehow kind of made a scapegoat for everything that's gone on at PSG. Because by doing this to Messi, again, I'm fine with suspending him. But by taking this hard stance against Messi, PSG is taking the easy way out of basically accountability and trying to fix the issues they have. They're picking on the easy target. Messi was probably going to leave even before this happened, and he certainly is now. You don't really need him. I mean, you've got enough of a cushion. You've got Mbappe. And Messi's always kind of been the second guy there. You're not doing this to Mbappe, but you can get away with him with Messi because, the fans haven't exactly bought in. It's just the cheap option. And again, it doesn't mean it's the wrong one, but they picked the guy to make an example of that. Basically, there are no consequences to this from a PSG standpoint, unless they somehow throw away Ligue 1. There are consequences if it's one of the other two guys. And you pick the guy who has never had his professionalism questioned by anybody ever in his long and remarkable career. A sentence that will never be said about Neymar or Mbappe. Remember the conversation surrounding Mbappe before that World Cup. And then he was remarkable again. He nearly single-handedly won France a second straight Men's World Cup, and now all of a sudden he's kind of back to being the best player in the world. But it's not like this has been a smooth year for him. All that Real Madrid stuff, basically just taking control of the club. And yet, Messi's the first guy to get punished for anything. That's what I mean by taking the easy way out and just picking on the easy target. Because Messi just doesn't care enough to be upset about this because he's done it a month anyway. And it wasn't just this. It sure sounds like he wasn't going to. I mean, if he would have resigned, he probably would have done it by now. The longer this went, the more it sounded just very basically, on the most basic level, right? The longer he goes without signing a new contract, the more that implies he's not signing a new contract at PSG. So you burn the final bridge, but the bridge was probably already burned anyway. So it doesn't really matter. But you're trying to kind of be the enforcer here and set new standards for PSG moving forward. It's not that I have an issue with it in a vacuum. It just needs to be pointed out that it's cheap. Because there could have been more accountability for Neymar and Mbappe, and there never was. And that's part of the reason PSG have ended up in the position that they are. Messi has never been the problem. He is the opposite. He wants as little attention as possible. And yet somehow he's the guy that ends up suspended here. But it's not like you can just let your star player miss training without consequences. I get that part of it. So then the question becomes, okay, where is Messi going? And I'm only going to spend so much time on this, but I do want to point out a couple things here. One, this is obvious, but it still needs to be said. This is not the same situation Cristiano Ronaldo was in. This is a Messi who was arguably the best player at the World Cup 4 or 5 months ago. 5, 6 months ago. He's obviously a few years younger. He's having a good season at PSG. Ronaldo basically got to a point where there was no home for him in Europe. Bayern were not taking him. Napoli had no reason to take him. Those were two of the clubs that got linked, and none of it ever made sense. There was the reports that Sporting Kansas City were prepared to put together an offer and tried to sell him, and I just can't see Ronaldo living in Kansas City. There just weren't that many places for him to go. That's not the case with Messi here. However, it's also just this bizarre situation because Barcelona makes plenty of sense, except for they're going to have a really tough time convincing La Liga that they have the money to do this. So you can't just kind of make that easy connection. Maybe it happens, but they've been talking about this since the day he left, and it hasn't even really come close. And again, remember, he left in large part because they didn't have the money to pay him. So then, Inter Miami. That seems to have been the front runner for most of this time. It makes a lot of sense. They've also struggled this season after getting off to a good start the first couple weeks. They don't seem particularly close to competing for anything. Does that matter? Maybe not. Certainly Miami is much more logical landing spot than Kansas City. And then the other option is Saudi Arabia. And so this is going to be a real test of how much influence that Saudi Arabian money has. Because, yes, you can... It is 100% fair to criticize Ronaldo for kind of empowering and supporting the sports washing and everything that comes with lending his name to the Saudi Arabian League. 100% fair. Part of the story needs to be acknowledged. There's the other part of that where I just also go, where else was he supposed to go? It's not like he turned down 500 clubs specifically to go to Saudi Arabia. And sure, the money helps. If Messi at this point in his career, when he clearly has something left in the tank and is a high level player still, a world-class player, even if he's not the best player in the world anymore, also chooses to take Saudi Arabia's money and not continue in Europe, not go to Major League Soccer, that is a major statement about where the sport is going, the influence of that Saudi Arabian league and the money that comes with it, and all of the implications that go along with that. So we're going to have to wait and see. It is, Ronaldo obviously had multiple, clubs in Europe he played for. His story was a little more complex, which is the other part of this that needs to be acknowledged. Is you could see Ronaldo playing for Bayern or PSG or whomever, just as a general concept, right? He played for United, he played for Real Madrid, he played for Juventus. He played in multiple leagues, he played at the highest level for multiple clubs. Messi stayed at Barcelona until Messi couldn't stay at Barcelona anymore, and then he went to PSG. It's much more difficult to see Messi even going to Manchester City at this point, and not that Manchester City would want him necessarily, but or Bayern or whoever. There is a difference there where it feels like if it's not Barcelona and it's not PSG, it's not in Europe. Maybe something surprising happens with that, but that does complicate things a little bit. That there is no obvious pathway to, here's a European team that could use him that makes sense for him to go to. Unless Barcelona can get the money figured out. And I'll believe it when I see it. But we're going to find out about how much power this Saudi Arabia money has. Because if Messi takes it too, at this point in his career, when he's already getting the tourism money, right? Ronaldo doesn't need the money either. But Messi is already getting compensated incredibly well from Saudi Arabia. That is a major statement of intent and a warning sign that this is just the beginning. And there will always be players just like the Live Golf Tour who take the money. But to have Messi, of all people, do it now would be incredibly concerning. So we're going to have to see how this plays out. He's going to have a couple games, theoretically, when he gets back from the suspension with PSG. And then we'll see where things go from there. But I'll circle back to kind of my bigger point here. You see, the fans going after him. I saw something about fans showing up at Neymar's house. This is not on Messi. It's just not. Did he make a mistake? Sure, if you want to call it that. There was some kind of miscommunication that needs to be addressed and he needs to be held accountable for. But don't go start acting like this is on this. What's happened to PSG this season is Messi's fault. There are way bigger issues that have nothing to do with him that were here that were at the club long before he got there. And I will point out one more time, nobody has ever questioned his professionalism once. There seems to just be something weird that happened. The bridge is burned. He's moving on. It's probably in PSG's best interest. It's definitely in his. Weird way to end it, but we'll have to wait and see where Messi goes next. The other thing I want to mention real quickly before I take my second break, obviously we had some Premier League action. Erling Haaland breaks the Premier League goal scoring record as City win again. Liverpool get a win over Fulham. You had your DFB Pokal semifinals. But the thing that's really caught my eye this week so far is what's happening in Serie A. So that's what I'm going to talk about for a minute. Napoli, another opportunity to clinch goes by because Lazio win. Napoli still have their game this week. So in the 24 hours, even less than that after this show ends, Napoli could be Serie A champions. But Lazio do their part to keep the title race alive, getting a win. AC Milan and Roma drew each other over the weekend. Really exciting ending. They both then draw midweek. Meanwhile, Inter destroy Hellas Verona. They beat Lazio over the weekend, which opened the door for Napoli to basically just need one result to go their way to clinch the title. So they've shot back up. Inter have shot back up into fourth. They're scoring boatloads of goals now. And all seven of your primary, your quote unquote big clubs plus Atalanta, if you don't want to include Atalanta as the big clubs, are within 2 points of a Champions League spot. That fourth spot currently held by Inter. You've got AC Milan, Roma, and Atalanta right behind them. And Lazio are not safe, and Juventus are not safe. Those are your second and third place teams. So Napoli are going to win this title. It's a question of when. But then you have a fascinating race for those final spots. Premier League, you've pretty much got your top four at this point. France, you've pretty much got your top three, your three Champions League teams. The question is which one gets that second automatic qualification to the group stage. Germany still got 5 teams pretty much fighting for those spots. Leipzig, Freiburg, Union Berlin, and then, of course, Dortmund and Bayern. So that's got some intrigue there. And Spain, you've got your top 3 set. So there isn't all that much excitement in terms of Champions League spots. But Serie A is delivering in that regard. Atalanta just kind of hung around. They've been, 6th or 7th most of the season. But all of a sudden, they've started to pick it up a little bit. AC Milan, Roma dropped more points. And Inter, after not being able to beat any Italian clubs for a while there, have all of a sudden kicked it into gear. And the other beautiful thing I'll get to in my weekend look ahead here is that all these clubs just keep playing each other. And so every game and every week just changes so much. And now Atalanta have caught up to the teams in front of them. So now a good month here to end the season. Maybe they don't get into Champions League, but they could knock somebody out of, European competition, knock somebody down to the Conference League. This is incredible drama. So, Premier League's got the relegation battle, which is exciting, not as exciting as it was a few weeks ago. But this is where your drama is in Serie A. Just every week, it seems like the entire complexion is changing. Lazio had themselves some breathing room, and then they stumble a little bit. They regrouped and got their win today, which is all that prevented them from kind of being with everybody else. But even if they don't finish the season strong, they could find themselves outside of the Champions League, outside of the top 4. So, absolutely incredible what's going on in Serie A. Be sure to follow that in these final few weeks of the season.